Oh, why is this showing up here? There we go. All right. So I'm Josh Fisher. I'm going to be walking you through how to use a table saw correctly and safely. This is meant for beginners and newer woodworkers who want to feel more confident using the tool without putting themselves at risk. So the purpose of this presentation is pretty simple. I just want to go over the steps you need to take before, during, and after using a table saw so you can work safely and still get clean, accurate cuts. And the main point is that a table saw safety really comes down to a few habits. If you consistently set the saw up correctly, position the material the right way, and use a steady cutting technique, you'll avoid most injuries and get way better results than if you don't use proper technique. And it's all a build up. The more you practice, the more confident you become, and the easier it is for you over the time. What you'll learn, first we'll look at the basic parts of a table saw, then I'll go over PPE and safety tools. After that, we'll talk about prepping the saw, prepping your wood, setting the blade height and fence, making the cut, and finally shutting down the saw and cleaning it. All right, basic parts to a table saw. So there are a few main parts. You've got your on and off switch, which should always be easy to reach in case if something goes wrong. The elevation and tilt wheels or handles control the height and angle of the blade. And on this particular saw, you just turn that wheel counterclockwise, and that will decrease the height of the blade, and clockwise will increase the height of the blade. And you also got angle gauge and angle lock, so you can cut bevels accurately. All right. Then you got the blade itself in this image and the rip fence, which keeps your board straight. The ruler helps you measure your cut width. The miter gauges that slides in the miter slot for cross cuts. The riving knife or splitter helps prevent kickback by keeping the kerf open of the wood when you're cutting. Then you've got anti-kickback prawls, the throat plate, extension wings for more support when cutting larger pieces of wood that don't fit entirely on the surface, and the blade guard on top for safety, which also helps keep sawdust out of your eyes, because when you're cutting, sawdust could potentially get kicked up into your face. PPE and safety tools. At minimum, you need safety glasses and hearing protection. Saws can run up to 110 decibels, which causes hearing loss after only about 10 minutes. Table saws, like I said before, throw out a lot of dust and wood chips, so eye protection is very much needed. You also want to avoid loose clothing, having no jewelry, and definitely tie your long hair back. Anything that can get caught up in the blade, you want to minimize. You don't want clothing being pulled in, as they'll suck you in as well. If you have long sleeves, your sleeve could easily get caught in the blade and then pull your hand in with it. Additional safety tools. You also want push sticks for narrow rips, and feather boards to help keep your board tight against the fence so it doesn't drift away from you and cause kickback. These tools give you way more control and keep your hands away from the blade, which is one of the most important things when using a table saw. Oops. Now let's get into prepping the saw into your workspace. First thing you do is make sure that the saw is off, unplugged, and while you're setting it up. Then check the blade for sharpness or missing teeth. As you can see from the photo, it shows you what to look for and how to identify whether a blade is good or bad. Chip blade can still cut, but the cut won't come out as clean as with a fresh new blade with sharp teeth. And finally, you want to brush off the sawdust and debris from the table so that the boards that you're ripping slide smoothly through the table saw. Next is setting your blade height and the fence. You want the blade raised so that the top of the gullet, which is seen in this image right below the teeth, is just above the board. Then use the table saw's built-in ruler or a handheld ruler to set the fence for the rip width that you're trying to make. Make sure that the fence is parallel to the blade as well by measuring the distance at the front and back of the blade. You want to do this in the image below. You can see how they're butting a ruler into the fence and measuring to the inside of the tooth right at the 1-inch mark. You want to do that for the front and back, and that'll tell you if the blade is parallel to the fence or vice versa. If the blade isn't parallel or the fence isn't parallel to the blade, it can actually cause kickback as it's going to wedge that piece of wood into the blade, and the wood could catch the back of the blade and kick it back at you. When it comes to your wood, you want to check it for straightness. Make sure it's not bowed, cupped, twisted, or kinked. The board needs to sit flat on the saw without wobbling. You want to pick the straightest edge and run that edge against the rip fence. You can still cut boards with minor defects in them, but there's a higher risk for kickback, so you need to be very careful, and you want to know your own limitations with this. Twisted boards are especially hard and will almost always bind on saw blades. Cupped boards are usually fine and can run them, but you want to make sure that the cup is facing down, which would be the cup kind of like this. Kinked boards and crooked boards are typically not the greatest, as when you're running against the fence, it's like a rainbow, and keeping that straight is very hard, and there'll be a wobbly surface. Now we'll get into actually making the cut. If it lets me scroll. There we go. Okay. So you start by turning on the saw and letting it get up to full speed. Then you want to stand to the side of the saw, not directly behind the blade or your workpiece. This keeps you out of the line of fire in case the board kicks back. Make sure you grip the board firmly, but not too tight. And keep your focus on the fence and your cut line, not the blade's teeth. Next, keep the board tight against the rip fence and flat on the table. Slowly feed it into the blade with steady pressure. You don't want to twist or pivot the board while cutting, because that can bind the blade. Just let the blade do the work and avoid forcing it. Some saws are more powerful than others and have more horsepower. If you have a cheaper saw, you're going to have to take more time and have patience and let the saw really do its thing. If you have a more powerful saw, you can push things like hardwoods, maple, hickory. You can feed those faster. So when your hands get close to about 6 inches from the blade, you want to be able to switch to your push sticks. Keep pushing the board forward until it's completely past the blade, and never reach over a spinning blade to grab the offcut. That's one of the easiest ways to get hurt. And again, this is something that happens. There's a saying where the more experience you have, the more likely you are to get hurt. And that's definitely true. The more comfortable you are with something, the more you just throw caution into the wind. You get a little bit cocky, and that's when accidents happen. So you always want to instill these good habits at the beginning. Okay, once you've made your cut, you're not finished yet. So final steps, you want to turn off the saw and wait for the blade to come to a full stop. Oftentimes when you're cleaning, you want to unplug it before you change any settings or clean around the blade. Brush away sawdust, remove scrap pieces. Sometimes that scrap pieces will fall in between the blade and the cover for it, so you want to make sure that you clean those out. And then finally, you'll want to reset your blade height and fence back to 0. So with the elevation handle, you'll want to turn that clockwise, and I'll retract the blade fully. This is important because when the blade's in storage, you don't want the blade sticking out in case if you're walking around the garage and accidentally fall onto it, or something else can fall onto it and then bend the blade. And blades are very expensive. It's something that you'll want to keep in good shape. So that's the full process. If you learn the parts of the saw, use your PPE and prep your saw and wood correctly, set the blade fence accurately, position your board right, make a steady cut, and shut everything down safely. You have a much better experience using a table saw. Overall, using a table saw safely comes down to good habits and respect for the tool. The more you practice these steps, the better and safer you'll get. And hopefully, with this instilled in you, you won't have any accidents in the future. Thank you for watching.